Before we kick off this video, I just want to start by saying Happy New Year, and I hope you guys are all enjoying 2025 so far. I wanted to do a top 10 video that I have never done before on the Resident Evil series, so today I am going to be doing the top 10 hardest Resident Evil puzzles. This list was completely made together by yours truly, so please go down in the comments below and let me know how I did on this top 10 list. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into number 10, shall we? Starting off this list at number 10 is what is, in my opinion, the hardest puzzle in the original Resident Evil 4. A lot of the puzzles in the original RE4 aren't that difficult, but I think this one kind of stands out for the rest, especially if you're a newer player and you aren't that experienced with survival horror games. The way to actually solve this puzzle is by going out into the front of the church where the cemetery is located. From there, you can examine the actual tombstones and try and match up the symbols on the tombstones with this plaque thingy. The only reason I put this one at the number 10 spot is because it's actually really simple to solve after you figured out the first time, because the solution never changes. There's only two solutions, one for Leon's campaign and the other for Ada's campaign. Coming in at number 9 for the top 10 hardest puzzles is the laser puzzle in Resident Evil 5. The laser puzzle in RE5 actually has 3 different rooms and 3 different sections to it, with each section getting harder and harder. This one can actually be really difficult just for the simple fact that if you make one minor mess up, then you could have you or your partner getting burnt to death by the laser. And it is an instant kill, so the second that laser hits you, it is a game over. It all comes down to rotating them to where the laser can reach a certain point to where it gains access to open up the next level, and it's actually really fun to go through and try and learn the patterns to this puzzle. Number 8 is gonna be the animal statue puzzle from Resident Evil 0. This one can be really difficult to figure out, but if you're smart enough to actually follow along with the puzzle, then you'll know that you need to actually light each animal based on its food chain. Luckily enough for me, the first time I played this game was like 3 years ago, so I had the technology that when I got to this section, I was able to just simply look up the solution to this puzzle. But without help, this puzzle can be really hard. Coming in at number 7, I wasn't sure what the name of this section was called, but I'm going to go ahead and call this the moving wall puzzle from Resident Evil 1 Remake. You better be good at your controls when it comes to movement and fixed camera angles, or else this puzzle is going to be really difficult for you. I've got to admit, in my first few times of playing RE1 Remake, this section actually got me a lot of times. This puzzle does definitely test you on your fixed camera angles and how fast you can do this, because you have to press the switch on this other side of the wall, and then you have to run around to the other side and be able to push this statue into its correct slot before the wall actually closes in on you and makes it impossible to reach that part. Once you time it right, it's pretty satisfying to do this puzzle. Coming in at number 6 for the top 10 hardest puzzles in Resident Evil, I have the painting puzzle from Resident Evil Village Shadows of Rose DLC. This one is kind of similar to the animal statue puzzle in RE0, but I actually find this one a little bit more difficult. To solve this one, you have 6 pictures with 3 on each side, and you have to align them in the order to where they are matching opposite to their prey. So pretty much that means if you think wolves hunt sheep, then you would put the wolves on the one side and of course sheep on the opposite side of them. This one can be pretty difficult, and I actually was able to figure this one out on my own, but it did take quite a bit of time, and once you realize that you just have to put the animal's prey on the opposite side of them, then you can start piecing this puzzle together and eventually figure it out. I think this one was actually a nice little fun puzzle they included in the DLC of RE8, and I think it's also actually by far the most difficult puzzle that we have ever gotten in a DLC of the Resident Evil franchise. Now, next up at number 5 is the electronic terminal from Resident Evil 4 Remake. This is another one of those puzzles that I was determined to try and figure out on my own, but it took me a very long time and a lot of just pressing buttons and guessing. But luckily, I did finally figure out how to do this puzzle. This also has 3 sections to it, with each one getting harder and harder because there is 3 different electronic terminals that you need to operate. This one after a while can just feel like a guessing game until you finally get something to work, so this one's definitely going to go in the number 5 spot, also because this was included in the original RE4, but in the remake, they made it so much more difficult, because in the original RE4, that puzzle was super easy. Number 4 is going to be by far the most difficult puzzle in Resident Evil 2 Remake, and that is the liquid solution machine puzzle. Man, I can't express how much I was just guessing and praying for something to actually work when I was trying this puzzle for the first time playing RE2 Remake. I haven't actually touched RE2 Remake in a couple years, but back when the game was still pretty new, I got very much into speedrunning this, and I actually tried to memorize this puzzle and was able to do so after quite a bit of practice. But I can recall on my very first playthrough this taking a very long time for me and just going through and switching vials and pressing buttons so many times. And I'm sure just about any other newer player out there experiencing this section would have went through the same exact thing. Now here we are on the final top 3 hardest puzzles in Resident Evil. We have the Portrait Room from Resident Evil Code Veronica X. There's a lot of really hard puzzles in Resident Evil Code Veronica X, and I was really struggling to decide which one to include, but after looking back and reviewing, I would like to think that this puzzle is probably the hardest puzzle in Resident Evil Code Veronica. It's certainly one of those puzzles that takes a lot of concentrating and just focusing and of course paying attention. Unlike the last couple of puzzles that I've talked about, this is not one of those puzzles that you can go around and just press random buttons and just guess until something happens, because this puzzle requires a lot of actually strategic button pressing. There's some kind of order in the Ashford family members that you have to follow that I think you can get help to by reading the file that is actually placed in this room. But regardless, you have to go around and press all the family portraits until you can finally make it to the last one in the center, which is Alexander Ashford. Now, coming up with this next one, I really wanted to put it at the number 1 spot, but I just had to put it at the number 2 spot. But just wait until you guys see what's at number 1. For now, I have number 2, which is the Happy Birthday puzzle from Resident Evil 7. If this was to be a top 10 list for the coolest puzzles or most creative or just unique puzzles, I would say that this one would have to take the number 1 spot, but it is actually a little bit easy to solve than most puzzles that exist, especially in the older RE games. But this one is actually really fun to go through and try and figure out from start to finish. This whole Happy Birthday puzzle is like one big giant puzzle in itself because it's like a whole escape room, which is really cool because that's something we have never had before in a previous RE game. As a matter of fact, this whole entire Happy Birthday section is almost like a Saw movie because Lucas Baker has this whole entire elaborate escape room set up just to see if Ethan can survive it or not. Between trying to light that candle on the cake and trying to figure out what that dummy finger is for, and also trying to solve all the safes and combinations, this is a really unique puzzle. Coming in at number 1 is going to be the water sample puzzle from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. When it comes to making this top 10 list, I knew that Resident Evil 3 Nemesis had some of the hardest puzzles in the entire franchise, with this one probably taking the cake as not only the hardest puzzle in RE3, but the hardest puzzle in all of Resident Evil, in my opinion. The one thing that makes puzzles like these so complicated is that the OG Resident Evil 3 has so many different outcomes and so many different endings with so many different solutions to these puzzles that it's hard to actually ever remember a certain combination or solution to any of these puzzles because they always change throughout your playthroughs. It can make it really difficult to figure out puzzles like these that are already really hard within themselves, but then after you figure it out a one time and then go back and play New Game Plus, you go ahead and realize that it's completely changed and it's not the same solution that you remember it. This is one of those puzzles that can take all day to complete and can even cause you to not be able to finish OG RE3 just because getting past that puzzle can be impossible. But that is going to go ahead and wrap up my top 10 hardest puzzles in Resident Evil. Let me know if you guys agreed with this list down in the comments below. Also, I'd like to leave a special shout out to my one and only YouTube Pro member, IcoProSam. I post reverse gameplay every day, so make sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell to not miss a single daily upload. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video tomorrow. Peace.